I got another email from this guy's from Savannah, Georgia. You ever been to Savannah, John? Or did I ask you that? Beautiful city. Beautiful city. But he asked, is it harder or was it harder to break into the wrestling business when I started, or is it easier today? Let me ask you that question, John. What would you say?
I think it's easier today because there's so many schools and they don't even care who breaks in now. It's just like anybody could be a wrestler nowadays. It's just crazy.
Yeah, anybody can break in now. If you got, I don't know, you can have anybody train you. So I used to have guys come up. Well, I said, well, how'd you get in? Well, I did this and this, and then so and so trained me. But then I would hear the name, a name I've never heard before. And I said, well, who trained them? And that's as far as their history lesson went back. They don't
Right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but back when I started, much, much harder to break in. See, I broke in Atlanta, oh, I don't know, mid 70s, something like that. You couldn't even walk close to the dressing room. Forget about going in there. You're not going in, period. And
Did Red help break you in?
my brother,
Yeah.
well, he was actually, my brother, he was the actual wrestling fan of the family, him and my mother.
Hmm.
So he was the one who wanted to wrestle, but he couldn't because he was married and he had a couple of kids. So he kind of started a little independent company. And how they started, you know how independent companies started? They found them a ring first. Then they would set it up somewhere. And guys would get into it without any training whatsoever. And they would bounce around here and there and get hurt and bruised up. And then every now and then they'd get the cojones to go run a show. And they would, so that's how I started. But before I started, of course, I went to the U.S. Army and I got drafted. But after I got out, I had a buddy that used to work with us on the shows, and he had gotten a job or a position with Georgia Wrestling. It wasn't called Georgia Championship Wrestling. It was one of the NWA offices. So he got a job over there, and he asked me one day. He said, "Hey, you wanna go to work with us?" And I never really I thought about it, but that wasn't like really what I really wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went over there and I talked, and I may have mentioned that the assassin, that Tom Ernesto, became like one of my first mentors because he was the booker. And I walked in there and I'm scared to death. And, and he said, well, what would it take for you to live for a week? How much money you need? Hell, I didn't know what wrestlers made. I didn't know. I mean, back then, like $400 a week is like $1,500 now, easy. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Definitely.
So I said, he says, can you? But I don't know what he said. Now I don't know if he said 300. He gave me a guarantee right off the bat. And now I'm just an independent guy. I said, okay. Can you make it on that? I said, yeah, I think so. So I just started wrestling. But back when I started, let's do a little history lesson, John.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, they had like 32 or 34 companies. Because if you were only halfway good, you could get a job somewhere. See, even down south, you had Florida, you had Georgia, you had the Carolinas was a territory. You had Alabama, which at one time had 3 territories. You had Tennessee, which at one time had 3 territories. Then you had Ohio. You had Buffalo. I think they only ran 3 or 4 years. Of course, then you had the WWWF in New York. And you had Detroit, Kansas City, Texas, which had 2 or 3 territories. Then California, Oregon, and not counting your Canadian territories, you know, your Calgarys and your Nova Scotias and your Montreals and your Torontos, and but those were the territories. So as long as you were just knew a little bit of what you were doing, you could go to work somewhere. So it was much easier to get into the wrestling business today. And I don't even know what they call, what is getting in the wrestling business? Getting a match on an independent show? Does that make you in the independent business? What do you think, John? Can you hear me, John?
Yep.
Yep, I can hear you. So what is getting in the independent business now? Just getting a job, just having a match on an independent show? Is
Pretty
that it?
much.
Well, I don't know. So, but that's kind of, but in my first books that I wrote about all that stuff. So it's called Tales from a Dirt Road and the World According to Dutch. You know, I kind of bring all that up, how it was back in the day, and you know, we were talking about it snowing and making trips in the snow and the heat. And I mean, you had to, you'd work in all kind of weather and all kind of conditions, even inside when you would go and have a show. If it was cold in that building, tough, go have a match, get in there.
How many
And
days a week would you work?
Oh, sometimes we work 7 days a week. Sometimes.
Wow.
Some places like in Mid-South, Oklahoma, Louisiana, part of Texas. In the summer, you'd work 7 days a week, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday.
Wow.
You do double headers on Saturday and Sunday. 1 week in Continental, we had like a tournament every night. And that week I wrestled, I think 18 or 21 times.
Wow.
That's a lot of wrestling.
That is. Got to be
To
tough on the
not
body.
Yeah, and not to get hurt. So, and people wonder, well, why'd you guys get on drugs?
That's why. And
Why'd you
drink.
guys
Yeah, that's
start
why.
drinking so? Well, why'd you drink so much? Well, hell, he's in pain most of the time.